I still remember the sound that night. This happened 15 years ago, and I'm still shaken by how everything unfolded. My name is Emily, and at the time I was working as a contract project coordinator for a logistics company. Because of the contract, I had to travel to Chicago from time to time. Not often, but often enough that it felt routine. Nothing out of the ordinary. That morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. There was no reason for it. Nothing was wrong. I wasn't sick. I'd done that trip many times before. There was no logical explanation. I looked outside. The sky was cloudy. I'd flown in the rain plenty of times before, so I told myself it meant nothing. I ignored it, packed my bag, answered emails, organized a few things around the house before leaving. By the evening, Bella, my dog, suddenly threw up. It scared me. She seemed fine afterward, but the thought of leaving her alone bothered me. My mom was supposed to pick her up later. She always stayed with Bella when I traveled. I called her, and she said she'd come as soon as possible. She mentioned the rain was getting heavier and asked if I was sure about flying in those conditions. I told her it was no big deal. She said, "Okay, just take care." She sounded worried. I was too. We both pretended it was fine. So I called the cab. By then, the rain was pouring and traffic was a nightmare. Cars crawled forward, red brake lights glowing through the rain. Every time I checked the clock on the dashboard, I felt that same tight pressure in my chest. I knew exactly how long it took to reach the airport on a normal night. This wasn't a normal night. At one point, the cab hit a deep puddle and jerked sideways. The driver swore under his breath and tightened his grip on the wheel. A few cars ahead, traffic came to a sudden stop. I looked past the brake lights and saw what had happened. One car had slid into another at an angle, pushed partly against the guardrail. The front bumper was crushed. One headlight shattered. Debris scattered across the wet road. A man stood on the shoulder holding his head. Someone else was shouting into a phone. I couldn't see if anyone was hurt. For a moment, I thought about how easily it could happen. 1 second of sliding, one wrong move. This could have been me. By the time I reached the airport, I was late, so I rushed to check the departure board. My flight was still listed. Delayed slightly, but not enough to save me time. I'd already checked in. I only had my carry-on. Phone in hand. Boarding pass scanned. Through the gate. I remember feeling relieved and thinking, "You made it." I started toward gate 32. I stopped at the restroom without thinking, set my carry-on near the sinks, turned around for maybe half a minute, dried my hands, looked at my face in the mirror. I looked tense, older than I felt. When I turned back, the bag was gone. For a second, I just stood there staring at the empty space where it had been. My first reaction wasn't panic. I assumed it was my fault, that I had misplaced it, that I was being careless. I checked under the sinks, then behind the door, then near the stalls. Nothing. Then panic hit. That bag had my laptop, my keys, important documents, and my grandmother's pendant. It wasn't worth much, but she wore it every day. It was the only thing I had left from her. The thought of losing it made my chest tighten. I remember thinking, why did I bring this with me? Why didn't I just leave it at home? I couldn't lose it. I walked fast, too fast, spoke to one employee, then another, then security. They were calm, professional. I wasn't. Time kept passing, and I started thinking about the people already boarding, about how they were sitting in their seats while I stood there stuck. Then I heard it. Final boarding call for Flight 482. My flight. I told myself I should board, that everything in the bag was replaceable, that I could deal with it later. I had an important presentation the next day. Security said they'd keep looking, but the airline was clear. If I boarded without the bag, they wouldn't take responsibility for it. I stood there with my boarding pass in my hand, staring at the gate, and then my mind started replaying the entire day. From the moment I woke up, the strange feeling. Bella getting sick. My mom's voice on the phone. The cab sliding slightly in traffic, the driver tightening his grip on the wheel. The rain, and now the pendant. I couldn't let it go like that. It all felt connected somehow. Just wrong. Like the day had been warning me from the start. So I stayed. I didn't board. At the counter, I explained what had happened. The agent sighed, typed something into her computer, and barely looked at me. "We can rebook you for tomorrow," she said. I paid the fees without saying anything. As the boarding doors closed, I felt something ugly settle in my stomach. And then I saw the bag, just sitting there, near a pillar, not far from the restroom. I picked it up slowly, opened it. Everything was inside. So I ran toward the gate anyway, waved my boarding pass, shouted. Too late. That night, I went back home. I barely slept. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before my alarm. Messages, missed calls, news alerts. The flight I was supposed to be on had crashed during the storm. No survivors. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen. For years after that, I questioned myself. Was it luck? Was it instinct? Or did I just happen to make a selfish choice at the right moment? I don't talk about it much, because surviving something like that doesn't feel like winning. It feels like carrying something heavy that no one else can see. All I know is that something small stopped me that night. Something frustrating. Something meaningless. And because of that, I'm still here. I don't call it a miracle. But sometimes I wonder if maybe I was meant to stay. If maybe there was something important I still needed to do. And that night, it just wasn't my time yet. My name is Alice, and I've been working as a flight attendant for a little over 6 years. The job itself doesn't change much. The same rush during boarding, checking bags, safety procedures, meal service, and then saying goodbye. But I still like it. I get to travel. I'm never in the same place for too long, and over the years I've made friends all over the map. That night was a late flight. Boarding began normally. I stood near the front of the cabin, smiling automatically, welcoming passengers as they stepped inside. I barely remember most of their faces now. Business travelers staring at their phones, couples whispering, families trying to keep children calm. Then I saw him. Older than most passengers. Late 70s maybe. Tall and thin, with a straight posture that suggested discipline rather than strength. He wore a dark, old-fashioned suit, the kind you rarely see anymore, and polished shoes that reflected the cabin lights faintly as he walked. In his hands, he carried a hat. I froze for half a second. Because he looked exactly like my grandfather. Not similar, not close. Exact enough that my mind stumbled trying to process it. Same deep-set eyes, same narrow nose. I felt a sudden tightness in my chest. I smiled wider than usual, without really meaning to. "Welcome aboard," I said. He nodded politely, met my eyes for just a second, and thanked me in a calm, steady voice. There was no sign of recognition, nothing that suggested he knew who I was. Of course he wouldn't. My grandfather had died a year earlier. He moved down the aisle slowly and took a seat in the first few rows near the aisle. I watched him place his hat carefully on his lap, adjust himself, and close his eyes almost immediately, as if the simple act of boarding had already exhausted him. Once we were airborne and the seatbelt sign was turned off, we began dinner service. The cabin was quiet. Most passengers barely looked up when we offered meals. Night flights are like that. People eat quickly or not at all, already halfway asleep. When I reached his row, I stopped for a moment. "Pasta or fish?" I asked. "Fish," he replied softly, without opening his eyes. I placed the tray in front of him, making sure everything was positioned neatly. He didn't thank me. He didn't move. But that didn't strike me as strange. Some passengers are just tired. By the time I returned to collect trays, the plane hit turbulence. Not severe enough to panic anyone, but strong enough that we were instructed to secure the cabin. All trays needed to be cleared immediately. When I reached his seat again, I noticed the food hadn't been touched. He appeared asleep, head tilted slightly, hands resting calmly. I hesitated. Waking sleeping passengers during turbulence often causes more stress than necessary. So I carefully slid the tray away, folded the table back into place, and told myself I'd offer it again later. The turbulence passed. Lights stayed dim. I walked through the cabin several times over the next hour, checking seatbelts, adjusting blankets, responding to quiet requests. Each time, I glanced at his seat. He was always in the same position. Same posture, same expression, as if time wasn't moving for him the way it was for everyone else. I remember thinking he must be deeply tired, or maybe unwell. Eventually, work pulled my attention elsewhere. A passenger needed water. Another asked for medication from their bag in the overhead compartment. Someone complained about the temperature. Time slipped by. When I walked past his row again, the seat was empty. At first, I didn't react. Passengers get up during night flights all the time. Restrooms, stretching, standing quietly near the galley. I assumed he'd be back. Minutes passed, then more minutes. I checked the restrooms. All of them were empty. I asked another flight attendant if he'd seen an elderly man in a suit seated near the front. He shook his head. I walked back to his row and asked the passengers nearby. They looked at me with confusion. No one had noticed anyone sitting there. I stood in the aisle, feeling stupid, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my brain had filled in something that wasn't there. At least, that's what I told myself. But my heart was pounding. I went straight to the passenger manifest. The seat number was listed as unoccupied. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I checked again. Then I asked another crew member. Then another. No one remembered him. It was a full flight. The flight began its descent. The cabin slowly woke up. People stretched, rubbed their eyes, and gathered bags. Normal sounds returned. Zippers, low conversations. I kept scanning faces, looking for the suit, the hat, the familiar expression. He never appeared. As passengers disembarked, I stayed near the front, pretending to assist while watching carefully. At the very end, we noticed a woman still asleep near the back of the plane. We gently woke her. She looked confused, disoriented. When she reached for her purse, her expression shifted instantly. Her bag was open. Her bracelet was gone. Her voice rose as panic set in. She insisted something had happened while she slept. Airport security was called, then the police. The calm of the flight evaporated. As they searched the cabin, one of them picked something up from the floor near the woman's seat. A gray hat. The same hat I remembered him holding so carefully. That was enough to tell me he had been there. I told security about the man. They checked the passenger list. They pulled up the boarding footage. They found something strange. A man wearing a gray hat did board the plane, but the camera angle never showed his face clearly, and there was no footage of him leaving. Nothing. Then I remembered something that made my skin crawl. Earlier in the flight, before I noticed the seat was empty, I had stopped a male flight attendant near the galley to ask for extra napkins. Thinking back now, I realized something. That man wasn't wearing his uniform properly. The jacket was slightly off. The badge didn't look right, and his face. For a moment, it had looked older than it should have. The police theory was simple. The thief had disguised himself as a crew member at some point during the flight, moved freely, avoided suspicion, and then vanished. That night, after my shift, I went home and pulled out an old photo album. I found a picture of my grandfather from decades ago. Same face, same eyes, or something that looked exactly like him. I still work as a flight attendant. I've flown hundreds of night flights since then. People can seem harmless. They can look familiar, respectable, even kind. That doesn't mean they are. And I always check the manifest, just in case. I've been allergic to peanuts for as long as I can remember. Not the kind where you get a rash and move on. The kind where you stop breathing if you're not careful. So I'm careful, probably more than most people. I don't eat street food. I don't try random restaurants. And I definitely don't eat airplane food. So, I'd been dating my girlfriend for about 5 months. She knew about the allergy. I told her early on. But she had never actually seen a reaction. And I think that made it easier for her to believe I was exaggerating. She used to joke about it, say I was too cautious, that I always ate the same things, that I should loosen up a little. When she booked the flight, she told me she had requested a special meal for me. No peanuts, she said. I double-checked. I remember telling her I didn't want it. She sighed and said I needed to stop being so dramatic. The flight itself was normal. Full plane, nothing unusual. I tried to relax, but I was already tense by the time meal service started. I always was. When the flight attendant stopped at our row, she looked down at her list. "Special meal?" she asked. My girlfriend smiled before I could say anything. The tray was placed in front of me. I didn't touch it right away. I picked up every little packet and read the labels. Slowly. More than once. No peanuts. No warning about traces. I hesitated. I remember feeling stupid for hesitating. So I ate. A few minutes later, my throat started to itch. Not badly at first, just noticeable. The kind of feeling you try to ignore. I stopped chewing and swallowed carefully. "Something's not right," I said. My girlfriend laughed, like she thought I was joking. Then she looked at me properly. My lips felt tight. My face felt heavy. She stopped smiling. "You're swelling," she said. That's when she panicked. She stood up and started yelling for help. People turned around. Someone pressed the call button. A man a few rows back came over and said he was a doctor. He knelt down in the aisle in front of me and started asking questions. I reached into my backpack with shaking hands and pulled out my antihistamine. "I have it," I said. "I always carry it." I wasn't terrified yet. I really thought it would be fine. The doctor gave me the injection. We waited. Nothing changed. My breathing started to feel wrong, like I couldn't take a full breath no matter how hard I tried. The doctor looked at my face again, then at my hands. "This isn't working," he said. That's when fear really hit. My chest felt tight. My throat felt smaller. I could hear my girlfriend crying, but it sounded far away. The doctor reached into his own bag and pulled out another injector. He didn't explain. He just used it. Almost immediately, I felt air come back into my lungs. Not completely, but enough. I stayed conscious the whole time, but my body felt weak and wrong, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The doctor stayed with me until we landed. Paramedics were waiting at the gate. I spent the night in the hospital. Later, they told me the meal didn't technically contain peanuts, but it had been prepared in a facility that handled them. That part hadn't been listed. My girlfriend cried the entire time I was in the hospital. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't realize it was that serious. I didn't know what to say, because the scariest part wasn't the reaction itself. It was how close I came to trusting someone else with something that could have killed me. I still fly. I still bring my own food. And I don't let anyone tell me I'm exaggerating anymore. Because once you feel your body start to shut down, you don't forget it.